Good morning, everyone. We were just waiting patiently for people to move out of the waiting area and into the webinar. So thank you for joining us for our third in the Fireside chat series. Unfortunately, you see no fireside behind the provost and I in this conversation today, but we will use our imagination as we have throughout the COVID months that we've been Zooming together rather than enjoying each other's company face to face. Just to remind, because it's been a while since we've had a fireside chat series, that the purpose of this series is really to bring individuals. Dr. Jose Antonio Bowen is one such individual that has graciously joined us today, that can be thought activators within our community for really important conversations. We have been joined by Dr. Susan Ambrose, who stimulated a conversation both on the change in the educational landscape and the cognitive science and application and its application in teaching and learning. And Dr. A.C. Grayling, who joined us, a philosopher and author, but also the founder of a new College of Humanities in London, and a very interesting model for us to examine and study and have conversation about. And I'm really excited, but will not steal the thunder of the introduction, that our third panelist, Dr. Christine Renner, our Vice Provost for Instructional Development and Innovation, will do to introduce Dr. Bowen. Christine has joined us to act as moderator today, as we will be facilitating questions that will be coming in through the webinar audience, which is, somewhere around 150 of you. So with that, let me turn it to my co-host, the Provost, Maria Cimitelli.
Thank you, Dr. Mantella. And please, a warm welcome to Dr. Bowen. We're so happy to have you here today. Again, like President Mantella said, I don't want to steal Christine Renner's thunder, Dr. Renner's thunder either, but I do want to say how happy we are to have Dr. Bowen here with us today. He is an esteemed colleague, and what I want to highlight is his most recent accomplishment, which is Senior Fellow at the Association of American Colleges and Universities. We are an AAC&U university ourselves, and so it's such a wonderful fit to have you here as we think about what liberal education means for us at this very interesting time in our lives with regard to the digital age and transformation of higher education, and yet still wanting to be grounded in those very important humanistic skills of critical thinking and problem solving and collaboration. So thank you for being here, and I will turn it over to Dr. Renner.
Thank you, President Mantella and Provost Cimitelli. It is my distinct pleasure this morning to welcome Dr. Jose Antonio Bowen to Grand Valley State University, albeit virtually today. We're joined today by really just one of the most innovative voices in higher education. And his work is firmly grounded in the scholarship of teaching and learning, but he is also able to masterfully synthesize research findings into practical and creative actions for both faculty and staff. He is an accomplished jazz musician, a composer, an author. He has served as a college president, dean, faculty member, and most recently as a senior scholar at the AAC&U. Dr. Bowen joined us in August for several sessions to help faculty prepare for this coming academic year, focusing primarily on course design, course and curriculum design. But we're absolutely delighted today to extend that conversation here and consider really how all of us can further enact our commitment to student success in both creative and impactful ways. Welcome, Jose.
Well, thank you, Christine. Thanks, everyone. I'll assume that if you can't hear me or something, I'll get wavy arms or something and keep talking. So I'm sorry I'm not with you personally, but glad to be with you this morning in this medium. So when I last talked to faculty, we talked a lot about classroom design. I did a talk then a few weeks ago on the 3 R's. what I call the 3 R's, which is the subject of the book that I've just finished, relationships, resilience, and reflection, and how important they are for students. We talked a little bit then about COVID and teaching online. So I'm not going to do that today, although I assume we're going to get, certainly you can't avoid the times that we're in. But I want to give you just a teaser of another idea that I'm working on. It's actually the next book. And so I've, my head is in that. And, but I'm just going to give you 10 minutes. So I am going to show you a couple of slides and get you to think about an idea that comes from behavioral economics, right? So the assumption in classical economics is that people are rational, and that what distinguishes us from other species is that we're just smarter than they are, and we're rational, et cetera. And so, people will buy the cheaper item, et cetera, et cetera. And so, in the 1970s, Avon Tversky and Daniel Kahneman started to think, well, let's try this. Let's experiment a bit. And so this new field of behavioral economics is all about how people are not so rational, right? We buy things at eye level more often. We take shortcuts. They started borrowing from psychology that $9.99 is not the same as $10, as all gas stations know. And so this has led to a couple of Nobel Prizes, and most recently this idea of nudges. And so I've been thinking about how to apply this idea of nudges to higher education, what I sometimes think of as behavioral education, right? Dealing with students as they really are, not as we want them to be, right? The students we want them to be are just sponges that can hardly wait to absorb all of our amazing content and are going to study everything we tell them to. But they're not. People are people. So nudges are designs that alter people's behavior, hopefully in a predictable way, but they don't forbid any options, right? So it's not about saying you can't do this, you have to do this. It's about nudging people to do things and still preserving choice. So governments are doing this, right? Default forms are a typical example. I'm sure the university does this. When you go to a form and it says, do you want to opt in to getting email about financial aid or about retirement plans? Right? You'd think faculty would be rational, right? But it turns out that apparently, according to research, half of you still have your mother listed as your beneficiary even after you got married or changed spouse or family situation, that, right? Because when you first got hired, you set something and you never go back, right? The default, it stays that way. So if you want to get people to join a retirement program, it's much better to say, you are automatically in the retirement program. You can opt out. You have to go in and check a box. So I haven't taken away your choice, but I've changed the default. So that's a design choice. It's also called a nudge. So we have lots of these on a campus, right? If you think about it, we are trying to get students to do the work that only they can do, right? I always say that, that learning is like fitness, right? The watching somebody else do push-ups is not that useful, even if they're intellectual push-ups, right? My goal is to get you, the student, to do more push-ups. So how can I nudge you to do that? So think about the choices that you make on your campus, right? Is the library open 24/7? Is it open, does that encourage people to stay up all night? Does the cafeteria do certain things? You have food delivery, again, some of this is pre-COVID. Registration is one of my favorites, and I'll talk about that because I think we have to learn something from Amazon, right? If you like Professor X, you'll love Professor Y. You took this course, right? You took Chem 101. You should probably take Chem 102. You got an A. Right? Think about that. We don't normally do that. We just say, what courses are you going to take next semester? But if I can encourage students, especially minority students, first generation students, right? You did really well in Chem 101. You should take Chem 102. You should think about a STEM major. You're a pre-registered. Right? You could unregister yourself, but that would be a nudge to help somebody do something. Even things like lighting, roommate selection. So the range of nudges is all over campus. And so I'm going to give you a couple of examples, and then I'll stop and we'll talk about a wider range of things. Everybody's favorite nudge is this one because it's a demonstration that very, very low cost, little changes can have big effects. So this was apparently invented by a maintenance worker at the Schiphol airport who noticed that men apparently have trouble with aim and they get distracted, right? Because nudges are all about distraction. I'm really sorry for this example, ladies, but it's a powerful one. So, right, this is a fly that's been painted in the urinal at the airport. And it dramatically reduces spillage rate, which may sound inconsequential, but it means that they use many fewer chemicals, lower cleaning supplies, don't spend as much time, right? It saves money, it's better for the environment, but it has a significant effect apparently in men's aim. And it doesn't cost, right? No one's forcing you to aim at the fly, right? It's a nudge. It's just this little reminder that, hey, hello, we're in here. Another classic nudge is the numbers of choices, right? So as we know during COVID and during an election year, right, people's bandwidth is limited, right? Your brain has infinite storage virtually, but you only have, I like to say your brain is like a closet that's massive, but it's dark. It has no lighting system. You have a little tiny flashlight, right? You can only see one thing or two things at a time. So you give me too many choices, I get overloaded. So in the classic example from Draeger's food store near Stanford in Palo Alto, they set up 2 tables, or they actually set up a table and switched every hour. Here are 6 types of jam, right? So you stop and, would you like to stop and try the guava jam? Then an hour later, they swip it over. Now I have 30 types of jam. I have the passion fruit, mango, whatever. And so more people stop, right? Many more people stop to taste my jam because I have all these flavors. But I sell less jam. I sell 10 times less jam because people are just overwhelmed. It's like too many choices. They retried this experiment in New York with chocolate. Surprise. If I say, here are 3 chocolates, pick one, people have an easier time. If I give you 30 types of chocolates, 2 things happen. One is people are like, and the second is they're less happy with their choice. Right? The more chocolates I have to choose from, I should have had the raspberry mango truffle. So think about what's the first thing we do to students when they come to college. Here are 5,000 courses, pick 5, right? So in the jam study, right, people just don't choose. They just walk out of the store. They don't buy any. They liked your jam, but you gave them too much choice. So when I was at Goucher, we tried an experiment. We took information that we had from their admissions file, like they want to be pre-med, they want to major in English, they like whatever. And we said, here's a sample schedule. It's the default, right? Instead of giving you a blank slate, give you a sample. Now you can change all 5 courses if you want. But of course, more than half of students didn't change any courses. They took the default. And we deliberately set the default to be, freshman English, for your math, right? We gave them the choices that we knew would help them go to graduation. So this improved, right, rates toward graduation because people are taking the right courses. And if I don't know anything about college, I have a niece right now I'm helping who just, right, 5 art courses, bad idea first semester, and she doesn't know any better. And I've told her 100 times, right? But it's not something, her parents didn't go to college. It's not, right? This is new for her. So choice overload is a thing. Turns out goal gradient is a thing. And we discovered this from rats in the maze, right? Rats in the maze run faster to the end, at the end. This is from, right, the research. You see the citation there, 1932, Charles Hull doing the initial, right, rats in the maze study. So if you get a coffee card, the coffee people figured this out, buy 10, get 1 free, is exactly the same as buy 12, get 1 free, but I've given you 2 stamps to start. Right? It's the same thing. You've got to buy 10 more cups, but I've given you 2 free stamps. You buy more coffee in the second scenario. You buy more coffee. It's not right. So people are not rational. So I'm thinking, well, would this work for grades? Right? I've given you 50 free points. You're halfway to an A. Right? Or are there ways that we can use the same thing as a motivator? Because again, our real job is about motivating. The electric companies have figured out that social norms work. If you get, this is a new bill from the SACR, you can see it's actually a real bill. And some of you may have seen these. I don't know if you have them there. But last month you used 63% more electricity than your neighbors. and there's a little chart, this actually stimulates you to use less electricity. Right, that people who get these bills, oh my gosh, I'm being wasteful, my neighbors. And it's right, you're compared to houses that are similar to you. And then it also tells you how much you would have saved. So right, again, I'm not forcing you to use electricity, but this is a nudge and it actually works. The problem is that the opposite also happens. If I tell you, hey, you use less energy, you think, well, gosh, I should use more. It's called the boomerang effect in psychology. Guess what eliminates the boomerang effect? That little smiley face, or a thumbs up, or a couple of green dots. It's like, what? So I've been thinking again for students. So I know that we don't think emojis have power. Emojis have power. Sending students a smiley face or a thumbs up, right? So I've been working on this is a list of ideas, but one of them is a study more project, where you studied less than the average student. You should work a little harder, right? That's going to be motivating. Or you studied more, keep it up. You're on the way to an A. So choice overload, right? Should we be helping students with their class selection? Right, our brains are filtering, just in time. What happened? What do I need to know right now? If it's next week, I don't think about it, and we think, oh well, students should write it down. Well, they don't. So we designed a career program when I was at Goucher that only gave you, right, as a freshman, don't worry about, just worry about your resume. You'll do interview questions later, right? Just-in-time information for financial aid. What do you need me to do today, right, in my text? I'm more likely to pay attention to. We all know about status quo bias, which means that once you sit there, that's your seat, right? So think of ways of disrupting status quo bias by either again, it might just be where you sit, but it might be other kinds of things, like the defaults. Once you've declared a major, let me give you next semester's courses, right? One of the big problems with the psych major is people put off taking statistics. And then they get to senior year and because they put it off, and now they can't pass statistics, and now they gotta start all over. Forcing me to take statistics earlier on, or as a nudge, just putting it in my schedule as a default, right? That makes it harder for me to take it out of my basket. Advisor appointments have been shown. If you have an advisor appointment today at 3, you can opt out, but here it is. That has been shown to, again, increase attendance at these things. Something called the measurement effect. If I say to you, are you going to floss tonight? Are you going to vote next week? Just asking you the question, are you going to vote next week, increases people voting. So reminding students, hey, there's a midterm tomorrow. Are you going to study? Even whatever you've without the answer, just reminding you that you need to study increases studying. But of course, implementation effect. So again, this is interesting because I've been looking at people like, flossing studies, anti-smoking studies, and voting is my favorite right now, at least. So if I want to get you to vote, a text helps. Asking you helps. Showing up door to door helps more. Can't do that right now. But what really helps is asking you a different question, which is not, do you intend to vote, but how are you going to vote? When are you going to vote? How are you going to get to the voting, right? Because now my brain is going, well, I got to go. Okay, I got to go vote. Am I going to take the bus? Who's going to take care of the kids? So the same thing is true. There's a study from Yale about shots. When can you go to the clinic? Put it into your thing. So asking students when they're going to study. And so on my website, I have a new study template that I've redesigned, especially for COVID. That's free. You can download it. But it's a one-page template. When are you going to study this week? What are you going to do? What do you think will be most useful? What type of studying do you think will be most useful? And I talked about that when I was last with you. Social norms, if there's ways to do that. This may sound silly, but right, Duolingo understands this. You're on a streak, right? A lot of language programs or other kinds of learning programs. You've done this 5 days in a row. Way to go. Keep going. Keep up the streak. I have a friend who's on 500 days of Spanish with Duolingo, and he'll do anything to not lose his streak. It's an emotional nudge. Could we do nudge grading? We also know the last one here is loss aversion, right? That loss matters more than reward. And so, that's why rebates work. So suppose I said everybody has an A. I'm giving you 100 points at the beginning of the semester. You're going to lose points, but hopefully you can hold on to your A. that's more motivating than you start with 0 and you have to get to an A. So those are some ideas for this idea of nudges, and there are ways of thinking more holistically about what we do, but also to think about the human beings that are on the other side of the screen. They're not just rational students, they're human beings. And especially right now, right, they have less bandwidth. So I'll stop with that, and we can talk about other stuff.
Thank you so much. You offered so much there, and I want to start where you ended, which is to think more holistically for a moment. And, you know, as you were describing all of those moments, my mind was going to the first year curriculum, and not just inside the curriculum, but the experience, you know, the experience of course choice, the experience of an immersive orientation, transitions, advising. How have you seen, or how do you think about the transformation of the first year when you apply many of the components?
So the research is really pretty strong that the first 7 weeks matter the most, and that the thing that matters the most are relationships, right? We talk about fit, a sense of fitting in, a sense of belonging. This is especially true for first generation and for minority students who tend to have lower belonging. They tend to not feel included when a professor, especially a white professor in a mostly white class, says, who would like to work in my lab, right? That's not racist. That's who would like to work in my lab. But you hear it differently if you look left and right, or you look at the professor and think, well, he's not talking to me. And so women, for example, do much better if it's explicitly stated that I'd love to have applications from women, right? Or there are lots, you know, again, I'm a man, I can't help that. But, you know, I can say something about, well, you know, here are some famous, or here's an example of a woman who worked for me who's now getting a PhD in chem, right? I can give you the little sorts of things change how the brain hears the information. And so relationships, a feeling of belonging really matter. So that's partly about congregating and finding your people. It's partly about getting a sense of people care about me. So, right, it turns out that the brain, right, is designed through evolution to filter out threat, right? You know, scary, you know, fight or flight. And that threat includes intellectual threats, right? It includes emotional threats. Somebody's belittling me, you know, or this math, scary word, or I don't belong here. So part of if you want to disturb students, which, right, we want them to feel uncomfortable, we want to stretch them. That's the second stage. The first stage, right? It's a lot easier to steal home base if you're safe at third, right? You've got to start feeling safe, and then I can stretch you. But if you don't trust me, it's not going to work. So establishing trust and relationships in the first 7 weeks is far more important than any content. So I often think, you know, we think, well, I got to teach you how to read. I got to teach you these various hard skills, or teach you how to have hard discussion in college. It's much better to think of the first, especially the first freshman year, first 7 weeks, as building trust, building a sense of community, so that I then am able to be vulnerable in a discussion. So for discussion's a great example, right? We're used to discussion. We know what this means. Discussion is scary. It's also true that the first person who talks in a discussion has way more power. So I'm not going to be the first person to talk. So I get socialized in the first couple of weeks. So if I have a hard discussion the first week or two, I think, oh, what's going on here? So practice. Have discussions about pizza. Where is, right? How would we know where the best pizza is my favorite, right? Because it involves different kind of discourse. I get to introduce the word discourse, right? You know, where do the Italians eat? Who has the best ingredients? So students can engage in a discussion about pizza rather than about this hard topic. And so, well, what are the rules about discussion? So I have to be really explicit, right? So you can only talk if you say, what I liked about that comment was, and, right? You know, we have all these academic rules that I don't know. So the sense of comfort with, oh, we're having a discussion. I know what the rules are. I know what that means. Then we can, right? You have to practice on some maybe meaningless, but easy content first. And that turns out to matter way more. And the same is true for everything on campus, that the sense of, I can handle this. I have the right classes that, you know, I understand how how this thing works. And so we often start off with content, and we need to start off with all these other things. It's the invisible stuff, right? Think about culture. Every country, every civilization, every college, every organization has a culture. When you first get off the plane, everybody else has an accent. And you think, oh my gosh. And then it takes you a while to realize, oh, actually, I have the accent, right? But it's true. Everybody has a thought accent too. I don't know what the rules are. We call it common sense, but common sense is really the invisible stuff that I don't know right away. I have to learn common sense. And so students have to learn the common sense of the university. And when that happens and they feel connected and belonging, they're much more likely to stay. And so we often jump in too much with content and forget that they're just, right? Orientation is a perfect example, right? It's like, I don't remember anything that was told to me during orientation, but I remember how I felt.
Thank you. That was great. I'll turn to the provost and then we'll go to our participants.
Great. Thank you. Dr. Bowen, I loved your talk. I love hearing about this. And I want to follow up on President Mantella's question. You know, as you were talking about that first day of class, of course, I was envisioning myself in the classroom and, oh, that's great. But I wonder if you could give us any thoughts about how do we systematize that across the university? And some of the things you have talked about registration orientation, but how do we systematize that professional development for faculty and staff? Do you have any thoughts about that?
So I think there are two types of systems that we need. The one is, as you say, to look at our processes, our procedure. So for example, students that get a personalized email respond better. So if it has your name, right? My doctor does this. When I go to the doctor, a week later, I get a text that says, Jose, I hope you're feeling better. Now, and it's signed from my doctor, first name. Now, I know that my doctor didn't sit there with her phone and send me a text. I know that some computer generated this, but I feel better anyway. So the medical community's figured out that the doctor doesn't actually have to do it for me to feel something. So there have been experiments with either giving faculty templates or simply saying, will you allow us to send automatic emails on your behalf with your name that say, you got a 91, all right, because I'm putting the grades into my LMS or whatever. Good job, thumbs up. Because those messages work. So, right, systems could just mean I pre-assign you to classes, but it might also mean things that look like they're more personalized than they are, right? The chat bots that some places you're using. So one type of professional development is thinking about how everything on campus works. Where are the pain points, right? This is an idea from design thinking at IDEO at Stanford, right? When you're designing a new shopping cart or a new banking account, the first thing you do is ask people. Actually, I'll give you one design thinking example because I like this one. It's the Bank of America example. They wanted more people to open savings accounts, right? And so they went to IDEO at Stanford and said, well, how do we get, so the first step in design thinking is empathy. What does it feel like to the user? What are the pain points? What is the user feeling? Well, people don't think they have enough money to save. They're poor, right? But they ask a lot of questions. Well, who does the money in your household, et cetera? And they discovered that in lots of houses, it's mostly women who do the checking account, and that they round up. It makes the math easier to round up, right? But it also means you have a little cushion. So Bank of America created a savings account where you automatically it rounds up your debit card purchases and puts them into a savings account. Right? And they have opened 12 million of these accounts. 60% of their new customers do this. So that's an example of we started by what's the user experience? And then we redesign from that. So those are organizational things. But the other thing is you say it's personal, right? Everybody on campus has to recognize that it's everybody's job, that every interaction with a student is a chance when students say, I like you, I hate you, right? Think about your experience with the help desk at AT&T, right? I'm doing corporate training for AT&T, and so all these people are telling me what I think, it doesn't matter, I like you, but when I call the help desk and I don't get help, I think the whole organization's a disaster. I hate all of you, right? And I think of you as the institution. So recognizing that the quality of my interaction, and so it's not about anything specific in terms of, it's just about recognizing that it's about how people feel, right? It's how people feel when they came to you with a question. You didn't have time for me. It's like, I didn't know that. So, I thought I had, but you seemed like you were in a rush. Well, maybe I was, but those sorts of interactions really sit in people's brains and color how they see their entire experience. And they right? We substitute it. There's another heuristic shortcut. My experience with Maria for how I feel about my college life. And now I'm more likely to quit or not persist because I think the institution collectively doesn't care about me because I had a bad experience with one person at the registrar or the bursar or someone, in the dining hall, or what somebody said after class. So that means different things for faculty and for staff, but I think everybody has to see it as their mission to help people do more push-ups.
Right. I love that analogy because I have to say, watch other people do sit-ups, so it doesn't work. So
yeah. Aren't these great push-ups over here? I'll do some at the chalkboard for you.
Yeah, cheer them on and my stomach remains flabby. So yes, thank you so much. Christine, let's open it up for discussion for everybody.
Sure. We don't have any questions in the Q&A yet, so please, participants, do not be shy. Enter your questions for Dr. Bowen. Dr. Mantella, Provost Chimitile, do you have any?
I've surely failed if I've stimulated no questions.
You were so scintillating that people are engaged.
Well, I was enjoying the 20 minutes or so that we've spent not talking about COVID. But I can't resist when we talk about, the importance of that first 7 weeks in relationships and ways you've thought about utilizing the digital medium creatively in order to create that space for relationships to form in the way that they're powerful, as you've described. So I wondered if you'd take a couple of minutes while we're waiting for questions.
Sure. So by this, in May, we didn't know anything, and now we know a lot. We have a lot of good feedback from students. I actually posted a tweet this morning there's an article in the Chronicle about some recent surveys. But the short version is that relationships matter more than they ever did, and the feeling of community matters more than it ever did. So the most practical thing you can do is over communicate, right? Be consistent with students. Things that we wouldn't normally do, like make a phone call to an individual student. That's probably a good idea at this point, right? Especially if you have a small class, check in with students who, you looked distressed today, or I just wanted to check in and see how you are. Arrive early in the Zoom class and leave late. I've had a good experience several times where instead of just saying, okay, everybody goodbye, I'll hang out for 5 more minutes. And a single student, just like after class, right? It simulates what happens before and after class, where I'm standing around and somebody can, right? I'm lowering the barrier to coming to see me. But being available for an online chat, setting up, if you want to have an individual Zoom call with me, do that. I'm available. I want to help. Over communicate all of that to students. Because there are all those other sort of psychological barriers to coming to talk to you about that. Consistency, post everything in the same place, have everything together if it's in the LMS or on a website. If you use whatever your LMS is, use it, put all of your stuff there so students have access to it all together. And then try not to lecture synchronously. Right, that this time it's the same with the face-to-face. The teaching naked concept where you're face-to-face, use that for relationships. The same applies to online, that if I start talking too much, and put that in a short video. Let students watch that ahead of time. Do group work when we're together. Do breakout sessions. Get interaction. Help create that sense of belonging. So there are ways to simulate that, even though we're teaching online. But relationships matter even more now than they ever did. And now it's consistent for the whole semester. And just, students want to be treated like human beings. They want to know that people are willing to understand that this is probably the worst year they've ever experienced. Well, no probably about it. I think for all of us, this may be the worst year, right? I mean, and we have an election, and we have wildfires, and we have hurricanes. I mean, it just keeps coming. So bandwidth is lower, and that means that there's going to be less learning this semester, period. The brain is full. There's not any wider flashlight that we can get for our attention. Remember those words, pay attention. It costs something. You are asking people to pay when you ask for their attention, right? Focus costs cognitive power. And if you're checking Twitter or the news, and we all are admit it, we're all checking the news more too, that sucks up cognitive bandwidth.
Thank you. Christine?
Oh, the questions are flowing in. Oh, it's hard. It's hard to choose. And so I think flowing from what you just said, but I think backing up a step, one of the questions was, what tactics do you suggest to help grow empathy for students and faculty and staff? Because you've given some examples of some actions of what we can do, but kind of building that empathy.
So there are probably, if you Google it, there are probably some great videos and some courses on this. I think for students, being authentic and real, talking about yourself, as faculty, we forget that we look really old to students and that we look like our lives are all perfect. And well, you have a job in healthcare and you paid off all your student loans. It's like, no, so I think being honest with students about, I'm having a hard time concentrating today. I read the news this morning. I shouldn't have. I did, talking about your failures. One of the most important things is to, say when I was in math class or I was in calculus, 100 years ago, I really hated this. I struggled with this. I failed at this. And then here's the trick that, being real and authentic has an enormous effect. But I think talking about stories, real people. Empathy is about, and journalists all know this, right? You start with a story, and so there's somebody lying in a ditch on the side of the road, and that gets your attention, and then you read the rest of the story. And so the same is true for all of us. But I think just reaching out to students, that's another thing. During class, spend a few minutes. Asking for stories. Think about the way that you do assignments and about how you set up breakout groups. Right. So for example, I want to demonstrate to students that the first person who talks, that's a cognitive bias, right? That we're susceptible to social influence, that who's talking matters. So I have students to say, well, just spend 2 minutes in a breakout group in groups of 4 and introduce yourselves, right? So on the one hand, they're getting to do this kind of belonging exercise. And then they come back and I say, so what happened? What information did you share? And they say, well, whatever information the first person shared. And now we can talk about the bias that happens right when you so think about ways that you can get a twofer, where students are actually sharing and getting to hear each other's stories as well as their content. And I think that's true with any content.
That's wonderful. Thank you. That's very helpful. All right, here's another question. How do we effectively balance creating a caring environment with one that challenges students to think differently and push their comfort zones?
So we have a lot of research on this, and it turns out that people who were really nurturing and caring and, Earth Mother, that doesn't help students. Students are like, I have high standards. You were going to jump over the bar, and I don't make any. That doesn't help either. It's both. Right? That if you really want students to succeed, you have to both have high standards and believe in their success and be willing to help them get over the bar. So I'm not going to lower the bar for you. I know that all of you work, but some of you may need a little extra boost, and I am here to help you. That combination matters. Sequence also matters. As I said, I want this to disturb you, but we can't start with that. This course has to start with making you feel safe in I need trust first. I need you to trust me. I need you to believe that I believe in you, right? So you've got to articulate those things. And then once I've learned to feel safe, right? This is why most of us have discovered that at the end of the semester, our discussions go a little better. right? Because students have built, oh, I now know I know what Christine's going to say, right? I have a sense, right, of who's going to do what. I know what the rules are, and so I can do more challenging topics at the end of the semester. The same is true for reading. If you want students to do longer readings, don't do it the first week. Start with shorter readings and demonstrate the value and how it works. You have to stage things along the semester. So don't jump in with the hardest thing and the most discomfort. Start with building a sense of safety and belonging, and then create the unease and discomfort. But you don't start with discomfort, right? You don't make me want to go back to the doctor.
Great, thank you. Let's see. There's so many questions. These are wonderful. It's hard to choose.
I'll just talk faster.
I think there's a question that that kind of gets us in a different direction, and that is about physical space. And someone mentioned that the Athenaeum, potentially is the name of it at Goucher,
Yep.
Was an interesting fusion building. And so the question is, what are your observations about the physical environment, the campus buildings, placements, and how that environment helps nudge behavior?
Right. So yeah. So we built this Athenaeum, this combination. It has a stage, with a tiered in the middle of it, and the library is sort of built around it. Coffee shop, obviously. They put exercise equipment in it too, and it turns out that people don't like to watch each other sweat. That was actually a failed experiment. But it has club space built into the library. So about getting people, it's like, so in the 70s, I worked in Las Vegas, and I discovered that you put the free buffet at the back of the casino. So people have to walk past all the tables to get to the free food, right? You know what they do. So so you put the thing that they want to get to, the free pizzas, at the back of the hall. So we tried lots of experiments. So physical space does matter. Lighting, windows, all of these things. Study spaces in the hallway. Turns out your office is in the scariest place. The end of the hallway have your office hours in an open space. You're much more likely to get students than at the end of the hallway in your office. It turns out we also built nudge dorms, that the distance to the bathroom also matters. Right? So empathy and data are interest, right? You ask weird questions. So you have to ask the question, does the distance to the bathroom matter? And it turns out as a freshman, it does. The further you are from the bathroom, the more likely you are to graduate on time. It's linear. It's actually linear. So the reason is because, right, you make more friends, right? The further you are from the bathroom, the further the hall is. You have to walk down the hall and you see more people. And if you're right next to the bathroom, or worse, you have a single with a bathroom in it as a freshman, right? You don't make as many friends. You're inside on Facebook talking to your high school friends. So sometimes the answer is not obvious, right? The question is, and so how does the space make you feel? So asking students what they want from space, how does it make them feel? What can I repurpose? We were building a new science building when I left at Goucher. And so, the biggest request was, not just where the bathrooms were, which we put them right in the middle of the building, but where are the study spaces, right? And how do we make nooks and corners so that people can have semi-private space, but they can still be seen? But where are the faculty offices, right? We wanted to put the study spaces closer to faculty, so those sorts of questions really do have a difference. Size of classrooms. Right, we often want standardization. Stanford's had a lot of good luck with the bean bags. I do a whole workshop actually on classroom architecture, and I have pictures from all over the world. There's a picture of a school in Pakistan that has no chairs. It just has a hole in the floor. And then people say, "What do I do?" Well, you're going to sit on the edge and face in a circle. Right? The architecture forces you to think about pedagogy, right? Not having a podium in the front. So I do think space matters, both for living accommodations and for classroom space, and the size of hallways, those sorts of things. But mostly because of where it puts the people, right? What you're trying to do is get people to have places where they intersect on the campus. So I would do, when I was a president, I would stand in the middle of a place where students were passing, and I just got fruit from the dining service, and I would get a couple of crates of fruit, and I would stand there and I'd hand out apples. And so A, I had conversations with students, right? B, they were getting apples, a healthier snack, but it also became a kind of a gathering spot. And I just spent an hour a week doing that. So finding ways to create space for gathering, space for interaction. And again, can't do it on COVID physically now, but hopefully we will be soon.
Great. You mentioned that kind of the balance between nudging and knowing what works versus what students want. And so one of the questions was, what do you suggest is really the first step for us in learning more about the priorities and needs of our students?
Ask them. Easy. I mean, so I'm a big fan of the pre-semester survey. And so what I ask before, so hi, you're going to be in my class in a week. I want to know, what's your situation, and I want to know something about your situation. Just the fact that I'm asking is creating empathy, right? Are you working this semester? Do you have a problem with hours? Do you have kids? What else? But also, what do you feel when you think about my subject? When you hear the words, stochastic analysis, what do you think? And that gives me a sense of, aha, this is where my students are. Or maybe they have a myth about psychology. Right. I think that, people are rational. Oh, that's useful. Right. I want to know what you think. And so, asking students, I think in a pre-semester or even, and also I do do evaluations that don't count. Right. We often, we get scared of the course evaluation at the end of the semester. Always do during the middle of the semester. Right. Just set up a quick survey that only you will see. Right. And the provost isn't going to see it. Just, how is my course? What could I do better? Right? What are you feeling? What's really working for, just a couple of simple questions, not long, or even after an assignment, after class today, right? Because people are more likely to do short surveys. So I could even do it like during a Zoom session right now. I set up a survey and I say, so before you go, here's a survey. Here are 3 questions and you have to answer A, B, or C or something. What was your favorite part of today? The discussion, the breakout, whatever. People will take 10 seconds before they leave and you get immediate feedback. Think about it, right? We should all be like the tennis net. The tennis net is the world's best teacher. Immediate feedback, no judgment, right? Yes or no. The ball went over the net, it didn't, right? You can't learn tennis with that. So you are going to learn better if you get immediate feedback. Oh, the ball didn't go over the net. So if you do what you think is a great class, create a survey that says, what is it that worked best about this? And it has to be multiple choice because I want it to be fast. Click, click, click. Or you could ask a question, but then you get fewer responses. But then you get feedback. And so the same is true for students. The more immediate the feedback, the better the learning. But I would ask students about how they're doing often, especially when we're virtual.
That's wonderful. Thank you. President, Provost, I don't want to leave you out of the asking questions business.
There are so many good questions in the chat. I would defer my time to the crowd. How about you, Maria?
Sure, absolutely.
You touched on this a little bit in the beginning of your remarks, but someone asked about hearing your thoughts on attracting and retaining non-traditional students.
Excellent. So, non-traditional students are going to have different needs. And so again, go back to the design thinking, go back to the empathy. What are the pain points? What do they see and feel when they come to your institution? And you've got to figure that out. And you're going to only figure that out by asking them. Is it the time of classes? You have classes in the morning. I work during the day. Is it that everybody's too young and I feel like an old person? You don't know until you find out what the issues are. Is it that you have the wrong programs that I think, questions aren't relevant to me at the kind of testing. So most of it, it always starts with empathy, with understanding, with observation, right? What do I need to know that I don't know? How else could I slice the data, right? The question, how far from the bathroom? Are there other questions that I could ask that might give me a different insight about this experience? But the D school people say do interviews. And one of the things you do with interviews is, right, what was the most enjoyable experience? What was the least enjoyable experience? How did you feel? Tell me a story about how you felt. But those are ways of getting people to kind of figure out, oh, that's really what the problem is. but it's really useful, right? I mean, one of the things that we find is that having non-traditional students is enriching for our traditional students, right? Having a variety of experiences in classes. But it does mean for faculty, it does mean that we have to think differently about the variety of perspectives in our classroom, and what people are bringing, and what they already know. And so that does require, again, an attention, paying attention to other sorts of things. So I'm at the moment, I'm doing more corporate work because some of the higher education work has dried up, as you can imagine, which is interesting because there's a lot more attention, there's a lot less attention to content and much more attention to design. So I'm doing a program right now for somebody, and they want 20 hours of meetings to go over a 3-hour workshop. And it's like, oh my God, just let me do my job. But it's interesting that there is that much concern. Well, how will people react to this example? And how will they react to that example? And I think, okay, you're right, because this audience and Joe knows. And so there's much more thought about that. It is making me crazy, but it is also making me realize how much as a higher education, we tend to just say, well, I've got my content, let's go. And so, I spend much more time thinking about all the things I talked about in my career, which is design, and it's about how the material is received and how I present it. Is much more so than it is about the content, because people will say, you know more than I do, but I'm still not going to listen to you. So right, again, back to psychology 101, it's who's talking that matters, and that we're much more likely to believe information that comes from the group that we want to be associated with. Then, in fact, I love this experiment. I use this all the time, the Arctic ice experiment, where here's the NASA, satellite data. What do you think the next year's data point is going to be? And if you put people in groups and you don't tell them about political affiliation, mixed groups will end up pretty close to the right answer. They can predict the 2014 from the last 50 years of data. But if I put pictures of donkeys and elephants on the screen, it's just pictures. I didn't tell people, well, Maria's a Democrat. Just pictures of donkeys and elephants. It blows the whole thing out of the water. Just reminding people that this is political data changes how they look at it. So as faculty, we're so biased to think that people are rational, and they're so not. And if you haven't figured that out in this election cycle, then I can't help you.
I want to stay with that a moment, because I really like the piece in Inside Higher Ed where you said we're asking the wrong questions. And so what you're really sharing is, like, what are the right questions now for us as we think going forward?
So as an institution, I think the right questions are, how is COVID going to change this forever? Or how might it, right? What might happen if behavior changes, right? We've all discovered that working at home has some advantages. Maybe I want more distance learning. Maybe I'm afraid of going to the movie theaters opened and nobody went. So students may not just come back. What kinds of activities? So I think there are going to be some long-term behavioral changes. And remember, that's on top of all the other demographic stuff that was already happening, right? States like Michigan have fewer high school students coming, fewer traditional students, and older people are moving warmer. So you're being depopulated. So what does that mean? So what is the experience? How is the experience going to change? How are people's needs and desires and behaviors going to change in advance? And I do think we're going to have to radically rethink everything we do. And so I like the how might we questions rather than, what should we do? But how might we creates optimism. I use this in class too. It's the difference between, can you make a nasal contraceptive? Right, which is a yes or no question, and people say no, okay, discussion over, to how might we make a nasal contraceptive? Right, I've opened up optimism. I've created, well, it might be possible. What would have to be true? So the same is true for your university planning. What would have to be true for us to have pre-assigned first year, for us to have a different advising system, for us to have a radically streamlined curriculum? I think one of the things you have to ask is, can I afford to have this many courses? You already know what the average course size is, but average is not right. Think about the difference between, I use this as my corporate work, between Chanel and chapstick, right? Sometimes you want everybody to love your product. And sometimes you just need a small number of people to love your product and pay a huge amount. So, right. So are you trying to feed too many mouths at once, too many things? So is it, can you afford to have classes of 5 or 6? So the average may not tell you what you need to know. You may need to know how many classes do you have that have fewer than 5 students in them, et cetera. And are you offering too many majors, too many courses, right? That's a hard question, and a lot of places are having that discussion. But as a music person, I know that I'm in the most expensive major on campus. And I am going to teach music even if there's no music major. Sure, music majors are fun, but I think what I do matters to everybody. So I've spent years building into the curriculum interdisciplinary products that have students using music as a way to think about culture, about the brain, about all sorts of other kinds of things. And I still like to just teach Bach or whatever, right? I want to teach some music that I like, but how do I fit into what we really try to do, which is how to change students and get them to learn how to change themselves. That's what really matters. And so asking hard questions about how many courses we offer and what we're trying to accomplish. Because ultimately, I will tell you, I think that if you're going to stay in business, you're going to have to be a better integrator. The future is about specialists and aggregators, right? The best physics department, the best integrated college experience, right? And Amazon and Google and the internet have taught us this, right? You want specific information, you can get it. We are not information brokers in the same way we used to be. We are information integrators. There's a huge difference between here is some information that you can't get anywhere else, which was the situation when I went to college, right? No physics lectures because there was no internet, right? This is the only chance. And I am going to integrate my physics content into your thinking so that you think differently in a semester. The internet's not very good at that. So integrating is going to end up being what will make you different from everybody else. But just content, the internet is going to do it cheaper. Harvard and MIT are going to give it away free in lectures. So that's why I started with nudges, right? We're like the gym, right? You can buy exercise equipment to take at home, right? But the hottest selling thing right now is the Peloton. And if you don't know what that is, you need to know what that is, because that's what's changing the gym industry, right? Because the Soul Cycle thing, which frankly I don't get, but my daughter loves, right? But it's a group, and I go to yoga because I'm taking a risk with my own life because I don't like doing yoga at home alone as much as I do in the room where somebody else, right? There's something about that. Everybody's doing push-ups with me. So understanding where people will do that and what they want out of that and how we can integrate our experience is what's going to keep us in business.
Fabulous. You've done an amazing job. Thank you so much. I wish we had like 4 more hours with you to really explore all the questions. Christine, thank you for your wonderful recommendation to bring Jose and all of his thoughts to Grand Valley. And I'll turn it to the provost for last words.
Just want to underscore what President Mantella said. Thank you so much. It was a wonderful talk. You've stimulated great discussions that I know will carry over past the hour that we've had together. And Christine will make sure that we have spaces to continue those discussions and make use of your writing and videos that you have to help us think a little bit around the question of how might we. So I love that. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you to the faculty and staff who joined us today. We really appreciate you taking time out of your day to think more deeply about how we can serve students. So thank you very much, everyone.
Glad to be here today.